2025 AHEAD Program webinar. Here's the agenda for today. We'll first give an introduction to the Federal Home Loan Bank of San Francisco. Next, we'll give a summary of the AHEAD program. We'll then cover the application process and walk through the application and budget in a case study. Then we will pause to answer questions relating to application. Afterwards, we will talk about disbursement and compliance, and we'll wrap up with a final Q&A session. Before we dive in, I'll give a brief overview of our organization for those who are less familiar with the bank. The Federal Home Loan Bank System was chartered by Congress in 1932 during the Great Depression as a funding resource for home mortgage lenders. Today, lending institutions use federal home loan banks to finance housing and economic development in their communities. There are 11 federal home loan banks nationwide, and each operates as a private cooperative financial institution. We are a government-sponsored enterprise and are regulated by the Federal Housing Finance Agency, or FHFA, which is the same regulator of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. As previously mentioned, federal home loan banks are cooperatives, and the Federal Home Loan Bank of San Francisco is owned by our member institutions headquartered in our district of Arizona, California, and Nevada. Our members include commercial banks, saving institutions, credit unions, insurance companies, and non-depository community development financial institutions, or CDFIs. The mission of the Federal Home Loan Bank of San Francisco is to provide our members with reliable access to low-cost liquidity, essential financial services and expertise, and resources for affordable housing and economic development. Most people in the community development space know the bank because of our Affordable Housing Program, or AHP, which I will talk more about in a second. We are required by a regulator, the FHFA, to use 10% of our annual net income for AHP. The bank has a public service mission and offers a range of products and services to benefit its members and the communities they serve. This flowery diagram demonstrates all the products and services we provide to our members to support their community and economic development needs. In the interest of time, I will just point out a few of these. First is our AHP General Fund and Nevada Targeted Fund. These are project-based grants for multifamily and owner-occupied affordable housing development projects in our district. Next is our AHP Set-Aside, also known as WISH, which are grants for down payment and closing cost assistance to low to moderate income first-time homebuyers. Our bank offers other discretionary funds such as middle-income down payment assistance and empowering home ownership. More information about these programs can be found on our website. We're now going to give an overview of the AHEAD program. AHEAD stands for Access to Housing and Economic Assistance for Development. AHEAD grants provide funding for targeted economic development projects that benefit low to moderate income communities. AHEAD grants support innovative, targeted initiatives that will create economic opportunity by piloting new interventions or expanding proven development models. As an economic development grant program, projects must lead to outcomes such as job creation, preservation, improved individual and family self-sufficiency, or upward economic mobility, for example. Since program inception in 2004, AHEAD has been funded annually and has awarded over $32 million to 883 projects. For 2025, The bank's board of directors approved $8 million in funding. Grants requests per project can be up to $150,000. Note that we may not award the full amount requested. Last year, the average grant amount was $53,000, with awards ranging from $25,000 to $100,000. We typically don't award less than $25,000 unless specifically requested on the application. AHEAD is a highly competitive program. In 2024, we received over 300 applications requesting nearly $26 million, and ultimately were able to fund 84 projects, or about a quarter of the applications. We expect this year to be similarly competitive. We have limited funds and award a diversity of projects, which we will discuss further. Now we will talk about the program eligibility requirements. The project sponsor must be a nonprofit organization, local government agency, or tribal association. Project must be located in Arizona, California, or Nevada. Grant funds must be fully used within 18 months of award date. Funds will be available for awarded projects starting in September 2025 and must be used in full by March 2027. We've had some confusion on the two parties within the application materials. So to offer some clarity, sponsor or project sponsor refers to the nonprofit organization, local government agency, or tribal association that will ultimately use the AHEAD grant funds for their project. The sponsor proposes and implements the project and completes the AHEAD application. A sponsor must partner with a member. Member refers to the financial institution that is a member of the Federal Home Loan Bank of San Francisco. These could be banks, credit unions, CDFIs, and etc. The member is the organization that submits the application and disburses the grant award from our bank to the sponsor. Both the sponsor and member are responsible for the project's completion and final grant reporting. If a sponsor does not have a member yet selected for the application, they can find one from the member directory on our website, which is linked here on the slide. For sponsors who have received an award in the past, they are eligible to apply again. AHEAD isn't intended as an ongoing operating grant program. However, past award recipients are encouraged to apply for a new project or expansion of a past successful project. There are 8 different AHEAD project types, and sponsors will self-select the best fit based on their project objectives and activities. I will provide a brief definition for each project type, along with an example of what we have funded in the past. Capacity building refers to projects that increase the internal staff and/or operating capacity of sponsors. In the past, we have supported projects that help an organization hire its first paid executive director, and other projects that provide staff with expert training so they can offer better service delivery to its clients. Other notable projects have allowed an organization to make upgrades to outdated or inadequate technology, which limits their capacity to serve clients and build partnerships. Entrepreneurial microenterprise is a project type that supports entrepreneurs, micro-enterprises, and small businesses. For example, AHEAD has supported projects that offer business planning for local minority and women entrepreneurs, or help with access to capital for micro and small businesses. Financial education are projects that provide financial capability and education to individuals and to communities. Examples include financial education workshops for immigrant communities or credit building programs for families preparing to buy a house. The most competitive proposals for financial education are tied to solid goals such as saving for a down payment or establishing an emergency fund. Housing initiative refers to projects that can support housing in a variety of ways, as long as the project doesn't directly fund affordable housing constructions and/or down payment and closing cost assistance. AHEAD is not allowed to be used for AHP-eligible housing projects or AHP-eligible down payment assistance. For example, AHEAD couldn't be used to build affordable housing, but it could be used to fund a job training program at an affordable housing project. We've supported research studies for the feasibility of alternative housing types such as tiny homes and ADUs. Job training projects are projects that will lead to job attainment or preservation, skill building, workforce development, and/or other job opportunities for clients. Some examples include construction training for formerly incarcerated people and workforce development opportunities for transition-aged youth. In the project featured on this slide, Red Feather Development Group is providing residents with basic construction skills to manage minor repairs and energy upgrades to their homes needed to reduce costs and improve habitability. This training is also intended to motivate greater interest in the construction trades that will increase the number of Indigenous professionals. Other economic development is for projects that don't fit into one of the other project type categories or exhibit characteristics that fit into multiple categories. An example would include an urban farm providing jobs, healthy foods, and environmental stewardship to local residents. Another example of other economic development category would be a local church providing employment and social services to their community. Social services refers to projects that provide social services to clients and the community, with an economic development component included in the services. We've supported projects that provide life skills and professional development for domestic violence survivors and funding to support homelessness prevention programs. However, I want to emphasize that economic development must be the primary focus of any social services projects. Technical assistance is for projects that provide direct technical assistance to clients and external parties. An example would be a nonprofit providing BIPOC or minority-owned businesses access to loan products, or direct technical assistance to rural farmers to formalize their businesses. A HEAD grant is flexible and can be used for a variety of purposes. The grant funds can be used in a lot of different ways, including paying for staff and consultants, training and program materials, research and market studies, etc. On this slide is a list of representative examples of eligible project uses. As long as it is an economic development project and the uses are clearly outlined in the application budget. This list is not exhaustive, nor is it exclusive. Now let's review the 2025 program timeline at a high level. We will get into the application details in a moment. AHEAD has a one-time annual application period, which opened on April 28th. We have an application document submission process, which requires members to upload documents to the bank via a secure portal. The bank has to set up the secure portal for each application, so we're asking that members provide a setup request form no later than May 20th. The application window will remain open until 5 p.m. Pacific Time on May 28th. After the application closes, we will then undergo a review period during the summer and announce the winners in early September. Ahead Grant Award winners will have until the middle of December 2025 to request funds, but we encourage all requests to be sent to the bank no later than our target date of December 12th to ensure enough time for disbursement. Members will have 30 days to disburse the funds to the sponsor. The sponsor should have access to the funds by the end of 2025, but could access the funds earlier if they work with the members to submit the disbursement request shortly after the September award announcement. The sponsor will have the 18-month grant period to implement their project, spend the funds in full, and submit compliance documents by the end of March 2027. Now I'm going to hand it over to Lena to talk about the application process.
We're now going to review the AHEAD application process, including a case study on how to complete the AHEAD application and budget. We will take questions at the end of this section, so please continue to put them in the Q&A box. For the application, only Federal Home Loan Bank San Francisco members can apply. Interested project sponsors should be partnering with members on their application. The application package must contain the following: the application and budget, which are integrated into one Excel document. Also, an IRS nonprofit status letter. For local government agencies or tribal associations, we would like to see the founding documents or other documentation establishing the organization. A management roster and board of directors roster for the project sponsor are also required. Both rosters must be included and uploaded as a single document. If the project sponsor doesn't have a board of directors, then they should include a statement with the management roster stating this fact. Please note that if any of these documents aren't included in the application package, the application will be deemed ineligible. We receive a number of incomplete applications each year that are ineligible. Please take your time to submit a complete application package. Don't get disqualified. To help with the application process, we put together an AHEAD application reference guide, which is a PDF document with detailed instructions on submitting, filling out, and completing the application. We won't review the guide during this webinar, but the guide is currently available on the AHEAD resource pages next to the application. We call the integrated application and budget the E-form, which is in Excel format. The E-form should be reviewed by both the member and project sponsor before submission. The E-form has two tabs, an application tab and an application budget tab. The top of the application has the application deadline details and contact information in case there are any questions. We highly encourage members and sponsors to look at our website and to review the application guide, as they may answer your questions. At the very top of the application is a progress bar that shows how much of the application has been completed. As seen here, the application is currently 92%. As we move through the application, we will get to 100%, which is the point where a sponsor should then submit to the member for review and upload. If an application isn't 100% complete, the progress bar will not show 100%, and we will deem the application ineligible. We've also included an application form input field legend at the top, which provides tips on how each field behaves based on the data input into it. An orange exclamation point means the field must be completed. A green check mark means the field has been completed correctly. A red X mark means the field has been filled out incorrectly or it is an invalid entry. A grayed out field means the field isn't required. Note that some fields may appear grayed out at first, but as the application is filled out, it may become a required field. We've included a table of contents, which serves a few purposes. First, it provides an overview of the different application sections and includes hyperlinks that will move the user directly to that section. Second, it provides progress bars for each section, which work in the same way the overall project bar at the top of the top right works. The table of content provides an at-a-glance view of which sections need to be completed and/or have data entry errors. The project information should be for the location of the project, not the nonprofit sponsor location. We've instituted a 60-character limit for the project name, so take this into account. We also use the project name for marketing purposes, so nonprofit sponsors should think strategically about the name and how it would sound if they receive an award. Note that the state field and county field are drop-downs, so please select the correct fields from those lists. Both these fields can simply be deleted if a user needs to start over. A state must be selected first before the county can be selected. In this case, California has been selected as the state, but the county has not been selected even though it's a required field. We click county and select Alameda because Oakland is located in Alameda County. And now the field has been filled out correctly. If you want to change the state after a county has been selected, delete the county first before selecting a different state. Both these fields can be deleted if a user wants to start over. Member institution. This section is self-explanatory, but should be the member contact that is responsible for this AHEAD application. This will be the member we contact with any questions. Sponsor information. In this section, as with the comment above, the sponsor contact should be the contact that is responsible for the AHEAD application and that we can contact if we have any question. Select the type of organization. Under sponsor description, we ask to describe the sponsor's core mission, management structure, and accomplishments. The sponsor should focus on clear, concise overview of its organization here. This isn't the location to discuss the project, so please keep this section high level. Also note the character limit. If the answer is greater than 3,000 characters, the table of contents will display an error message. In this case study, we have an error message saying that we are 57 characters over. So this is not an acceptable answer. We need to delete part of the data entry. So then when we click back out, we can see the message has changed to how many characters we have remaining and a green check mark. Now the answer is correct. One trick to creating a paragraph in these sections is to hit Alt-Enter. Hitting just Enter by itself will move the cursor out of the field. So use this method to write multiple paragraphs. Now, a head grant. In this section, we ask about the grant request and the start-end date of the use of AHEAD grant funds. Remember that AHEAD is an 18-month grant. So if you win an award, the funds must be fully spent within that time period. The start date can't be earlier than September 2025. Even though we announced the AHEAD Awards early in September, the AHEAD grant can cover expenses as early as September 1st, 2025, even if the dispersed award isn't received until later in fall 2025. AHEAD is intended to be a disbursement program, not a reimbursement program. So we expect all project expenses to be no earlier than September 2025. We also ask if the nonprofit sponsor has won an AHEAD award in the past years. If this question is answered yes, the section below will allow input. Put the most recent awards first. Winning an award in past years doesn't exclude the sponsor or project from applying in the current year. The next section is project summary, where we will ask the sponsor to describe the project that will use the AHEAD funds. Please keep this section brief. We are looking for clarity in this section so that we fully understand the project. Again, note the character limit. We want sponsors to describe how the project or program will work, how it will benefit low to moderate income households or communities, what goals will the project look to achieve, and what impacts and outcomes are expected if the project received an AHEAD award. This is also the section to clearly outline the individual and community economic benefits of receiving AHEAD funds. Be as specific as possible about the project activities and beneficiaries. We are looking for innovative projects, so please consider that when applying for AHEAD. For project type, the E-form will allow only one answer to be selected. Note that if other economic development is chosen as the project type, the grayed out box will become yellow. So please briefly describe the type of economic development project in the box provided. Underneath project types are a set of questions that are required for all projects and help us determine program eligibility. The AHEAD program grant funds must benefit low, moderate wage earners, small businesses, the greater community, or low-income households, which is why we ask these questions. The first question asks about job creation preservation. We've always asked this question in the past, but we've started focusing more on the number of jobs being created or preserved with the use of the AHEAD grant. And we'll also follow up on this question if a project is awarded a grant. Depending on the specifics of your project, this may be the number of staff supported by AHEAD funds at your organization, or the clients you support to obtain or maintain their employment. The next 4 questions will help us determine eligibility for the program, and at least one of these questions must be answered yes to be eligible for an AHEAD award. The last question asks about the AMI of people who receive services from the sponsor. AMI refers to area median income. AMI is available on HUD's website and should be used based on the main project location. Underneath these questions are 5 sets of questions that correspond to the selected project type. Fill out the current and future impact of the project. For this case study, the project type is housing initiative. So we need to report how many individuals are currently served by the sponsor of this program, and then how many new unique individuals will be served within a head award. The next section asks about targeted beneficiaries. Please check all that apply. If other at-risk populations is selected, then briefly describe what other population is being served by the project. The next section asks about targeted service area, which is a drop-down list. If other is selected, then briefly describe the service area. Peri-urban refers to a geographic location that exhibits both rural and urban characteristics, typically an area between town and rural. A good example would be parts of Reno, which exhibits areas that quickly transition from urban to more rural. Project results. The next section asks about the project's results and how they will be measured or evaluated. Again, note the character limit. We want the sponsor to clearly describe how they will measure results or successes for the project. In our experience reviewing applications, quantitative measures are easier to understand and to compare at a later date, but it is up to the sponsor to determine their measurement and evaluation methods. If awarded a header grant, we will revisit this section. This section on other Federal Home Loan Bank San Francisco programs is for informational purposes only. Please fill out to the best of your ability. And if you have questions about awards and other programs offered by the bank, please reach out to us. The next section deals with the project use of funds. As a reminder, the AHEAD funds must be fully used within 18 months of the date of the award. So this section specifically asks whether the sponsor will be able to use the funds within this time frame. We will review the expected length of the project timeline, so please make sure the AHEAD funds can be used within 18 months. We then ask the sponsor to briefly describe how AHEAD funds will actually be used during this time frame. The next section asks about member involvement in the project. Based on the relationship and involvement between the member and sponsor, please list whether the member is providing any type of financial or non-financial support to the project. Examples of non-financial involvement by the member could be sharing of financial education curriculum, volunteer staff time, or involvement as a board member with the sponsor. The last two sections ask about other funding sources and other organizations involved in the project. Fill out both of these sections to the best of your ability. These sections are for information only to help us evaluate the total scope of the project, so there is no right or wrong answer. We ask for both financial sources of fund and non-financial sources, as in other organizations that are involved in the project. We only allow a few responses in this section of the application, so please choose the sources or orgs that are most involved in the project. Now that we've reviewed the application, let's look at AHEAD Budget tab. The budget workbook will automatically input the project name, sponsor name, and budget start end dates at the top. Note, there's also a link at the top of the right corner where it says Back to Ahead application form. This is visible at all times and can be clicked to go back to the application. The budget includes brief instructions on filling out the two sections of the budget, the sources section and the uses section. These are also available in the reference guide. Fill out the project budget application column for sources. These are all of the sources of funds for the project, including the AHEAD grant. If the AHEAD grant is the total budget, that is acceptable. The requested AHEAD grant amount will be input automatically into the budget. In this example, the AHEAD grant is already pre-filled and the project is expecting $25,000 in government grants, $60,000 in foundation grants, $17,000 in organization income, and then $10,000 for other fee-for-service income, for a total project budget of $190,000. We have these other line items which you can use for other line items that don't fit into one of the existing categories. But please be specific if you use this line item and include a line item description. Now let's fill out other sources committed and other sources anticipated. We understand the anticipated column is an estimate, so fill this out to the best of your ability. The budget application column for uses. This should be for all expenses expected for the project. The sponsors should carefully consider AHEAD funding for as few line items as possible, since backup documentation will be required for every line item. This makes it easier for the sponsor to track these expenses. In this example, the sponsor is requesting $78,000 in AHEAD funding. We can see they've allocated it to 4 different expense line items. We also asked for the other sources. So in this example, $112,000 needs to be allocated to different expenses. If you look at salary and wages, the budget is showing $80,000 in expenses. AHEAD will cover $36,000 and other sources will cover $44,000. And the far right column should balance out to 0. Note on other line items, we leave space for other line items, but please be specific if you use this line item. For example, we have a line item for $5,000 in this budget with no description. I will correct that now to add participant meals. Note on admin fees. We don't allow admin fees to members, but if a nonprofit has a fiscal sponsor or is part of a larger national nonprofit that provides services, we could allow that expense. There is no maximum, but we typically see 10 to 15% allocated to overhead. Be prepared to document this number. Now we're going to fill out a AHEAD requested column. This should be for the exact expenses you expect to use the AHEAD funds for. Fill out other sources column. No need to break out committed and anticipated other sources anymore. A note on overhead expenses. Program expenses should be for expenses specific to the project or program. An example would be curriculum and instructional supplies directly tied to a financial education program offered by the sponsor. Overhead expenses should be for general expenses shared across different projects or programs managed by the sponsor. These are essentially indirect or administrative costs, such as rent, utility, office supplies, etc. Now, we've intentionally not balanced this budget because we want to see the behavior of the form when there are errors, and so we can help correct those errors together. But assuming we think we filled out this budget correctly, we would then navigate back to the application form. And there's a checkbox at the bottom that says the application budget worksheet has been fully completed. This should only be checked after the budget is done. When we click that box, we get a red error message saying the budget does not balance and to go back to the budget and correct any errors. When we go back to the budget, all errors will be highlighted in red so that we can easily fix them. Errors are typically one of the following. The must equal 0 on the right side should be 0. The excess deficiency row at the bottom should be 0. So on the sources side, we can see that the foundation grants have not been properly allocated between committed and anticipated sources. We've identified 60,000 in foundation grants, but only have 45,000 under anticipated. So we have a $15,000 imbalance. If we enter 15,000 in this section and click enter, the error message goes away. And this part of the budget balances now. Now let's review the uses to see if there are any error messages down there. And we can see there are no error messages. So this budget is now complete. When we navigate back to the application, we can see a green check mark has now appeared on the form. We can now go back to the top of the application and try to figure out why we're not 100% complete, which we will need to be before submitting. If we look at the table of contents, we can see that all sections are complete except project summary. If we click on the project summary, we can see that we missed filling out the project impact question. So in this example, we're going to say that 200 unique individuals are currently served by the sponsor of this project. And with the AHEAD grant, 400 more will be served. Now, this is an acceptable answer. We can see the green check marks, and we click back to the top of the application. We can see that we've reached 100%. The app is now complete and ready for the project sponsor to submit to the member. Please don't forget to save your work as you make your way through the application. Now, let's look at some tips for writing a strong application. First, check for typos. Clearly define the goal to be accomplished and what impact it will create. Describe how your organization's experience contributes to the feasibility of the proposed project. Align goals with a demonstrated need for the community or population to be served. Include data that may support the need of the community. Ensure that the project activities and goals are aligned with economic development. And if possible, connect your project to the needs and priorities outlined in the bank's 2025 Targeted Community Lending Plan. All applications and supporting documents must be submitted via the bank's secure portal, and only members can access the portal at this time. It is imperative that members request a workspace by May 20th so that the bank has enough time to set up the workspace and the member has enough time to upload the application before the deadline. We typically have a 2 to 3 day turnaround to grant access after a request. Sponsor will complete the AHEAD application package and route documents to their member partner. All personal identifying information must be redacted from the application documents, including Social Security numbers, bank account numbers, and personal addresses, phone numbers, and emails. We cannot accept documents into the portal with PII, and we do not have the capacity to redact this information for you. Again, if PII is included, application will be deemed ineligible. So please remember to review. For example, we often see the addresses of retired board members. So please redact this information. The workspace will contain 3 folders for each of the application documents. Members can learn more about uploading documents in our reference guide, How to Upload AHEAD Documents, which is available on our website. Here are the important dates for the 2025 round. Application round is open and currently accepting portal setup requests. The link is in the slide and in the Zoom chat to the form for members. The deadline to request a workspace is Tuesday, May 20th. Portal requests must be emailed to aheadportal@FHLBSF.com. If this deadline is missed, you will not be able to submit an application the following week. The application deadline is Wednesday, May 28th at 5 p.m. Application packages must be uploaded to the secure portal by the members. We ask members and sponsors to address all questions about the application prior to this deadline. We don't provide feedback on applications during the round, but will provide clarifying answers about the application process. Now we're going to move on to our live Q&A section. Now that we've gone over the application process, we will briefly review the final 2 pieces if a project is awarded an AHEAD grant. I will now turn it over to Eduardo Martinez to discuss the disbursement and compliance process.
Thank you, Lena. Here is the program timeline we saw earlier. Assuming a project is selected for an AHEAD grant, this is where we are in the process, the disbursement request period. As a reminder, the application round will close on May 28th, and after we review the application in July and August, we will make the award announcement in September. For those projects that have been selected for an award, we'll move on to disbursement, and then we'll have until March 2027 to spend the grant funds. There are 3 key steps for the disbursement of AHEAD grants. First is the announcement, which takes place in September. The AHEAD awards will be announced on the bank's public website and in an email to all applicants. We will also send out an email to each member and sponsor on winning projects with detailed instructions on how to access the grant funds. In the second step, the member will need to submit a disbursement request to us, which includes 3 documents: a signed program agreement, a certification and disbursement request, or CDR, and a disbursement budget. I will go over these more in a minute, but the important thing to note here is that the disbursement package must be submitted to the bank so that the bank can disperse the funds by December 31st, 2025. Otherwise, the grant funds will be lost. We encourage members to submit the documents no later than early December to ensure that there is enough time for disbursement. Also, the sponsor should have access to the funds by the end of 2025, but could access the funds earlier if they work with the member to submit the disbursement request shortly after the September award announcement. The last step, assuming a complete disbursement package, is the bank will disperse the grant funds to the member. As Cindy mentioned earlier, we pass ahead grants through our members, so the funds will go from us to the member and then on to the sponsor. Once a member receives the grant funds, they have 30 days to disperse funds to the sponsor. We leave it up to the member and sponsor to work out the best way to disperse the funds after the bank has dispersed the funds to the member. All of the documents must be submitted via the bank secure portal. This portal is different from the portal at application, so the member will need to submit a secure portal request form again. This workspace will be the same one used for compliance. Now we will dive a little deeper into the 3 documents in the disbursement package. The AHEAD program agreement. The first disbursement document is the program agreement. This is a 5-page document that is a contract between the bank, the member, and the sponsor. Because it is a contract, we recommend having your legal team review before signing, and it must be signed by an authorized signer of our member institutions and a project sponsor organization. The program agreement is currently available on the bank's website, so please review the document prior to submitting an application. Please keep in mind that the parties are agreeing to spend funds according to the application and budget, fully expend ahead funds within 18 months when compliance is due, and notify us of any changes or delays. We've noticed some winning projects from the last few years that aren't using all of the ahead grant during the grant period and are then seeking extensions. While we understand some projects have legitimate delays and we do have the ability to grant extensions on a case-by-case basis, we would prefer not to. Instead, we are asking members and sponsors to be more aware of the 18-month grant period and to make sure the ahead funds will be spent during that time frame. Sponsors that show a pattern of not using the funds within 18 months will be noted when reviewing their future applications. The certification and disbursement request. The CDR is a 1-page document which is only filled out by the member, in which the member certifies to the bank that all program requirements have been met, and the CDR is available on the bank's website, so feel free to review at any time. The disbursement budget. Next, we will briefly talk about the disbursement budget. The disbursement budget explains how ahead funds will be used on actual award and any other changes to the budget since the time of application. About 5 months will have passed between when you submit the application and when awards are announced. And we understand that some projects may experience minor changes to the budget in that time. However, if there are major changes in the project or budget between application and award, please let the bank know as soon as possible so we can discuss options. We won't go into detail about the disbursement budget today because we will provide more detailed instructions to the projects that receive an award, and we can also provide direct technical assistance to members and sponsors on the disbursement process. Compliance. Now that we've gone over the disbursement process, let's briefly review the final component of receiving an ahead grant, compliance. Here's the program timeline again. Assuming that a project is selected for an ahead grant and the funds have been dispersed, the sponsor and member still have a compliance responsibility to report how the ahead funds were used and to keep track of project expenses. We have an 18-month compliance period for grants that win an award this year. The funds must be fully spent and compliance documents must be submitted no later than March 31st, 2027, which is 18 months from the award date in September. A sponsor and member can submit compliance documents anytime during this 18-month period, so you don't have to wait until March of 2027 if the project ends earlier. In fact, we encourage submissions of compliance documents as soon as the ahead funds have been fully spent and the project goals have been achieved. The compliance package must include the following documents, which we'll discuss briefly: the ahead project status report, the ahead compliance budget, and backup documentation for use of ahead grant funds. The bank has simplified our program of compliance process to streamline and reduce the time and effort required for both members and sponsors to submit the documentation. Some projects will be selected for an abbreviated compliance review. The bank will determine which projects are eligible for an abbreviated compliance review based on a number of factors, including ahead application and the project sponsor's history with the ahead program. Please note that even if a project is selected for abbreviated compliance and therefore only submits a project status report, we do reserve the right to request for additional documentation. As with the rest of ahead, all documents must be submitted via the bank's secure portal, which is the same as disbursement. It is important to note that if compliance documentation or requirements aren't met, we could deem the project as non-compliant. Non-compliance would include the following matters: not spending the entire ahead grant within 18 months, not delivering a complete compliance package within 18 months, including a lack of backup documentation, if any major changes to the scope of the project or budget without bank approval, or not curing any deficiencies within a reasonable time frame. We take compliance very seriously and want all members and sponsors to know that non-compliance in past years may impact the member or sponsor from receiving an ahead award in this year or in future years. The first piece of compliance is the final project status report, which certifies that program requirements have been met, and it must be signed by an authorized signer of the member institution and the sponsor organization. It will also ask about the following: the final status of the project, including what was accomplished, what impacts and outcomes were achieved, to what was stated in the original application. All projects must submit a PSR. The project status report is due when the ahead funds have been fully spent and no later than 18 months after the award date. The project status report is currently available on the bank's website, so we encourage all members and sponsors to review the report to better understand the bank's expectations and to help with putting together the application for this round. We will provide a more in-depth compliance training for grant recipients in January. The compliance budget. Those required to do a full compliance review will need to submit a budget. The compliance budget explains how the ahead funds were actually used, along with any other changes to the budget since the time of disbursement. This should be essentially the same as the disbursement budget, so we won't review it at this time, but it will look familiar. Backup expense documentation. Those required to do full compliance will need to submit backup documentation. We will communicate full versus abbreviated compliance, so it's important to track and save throughout the grant in case you are selected for full compliance review. The final piece of compliance is backup documentation, which tends to be one of the more confusing pieces of compliance. This also ties directly to the application. Backup documentation is required for the entire ahead grant amount, so each line item identified on the budget must have some type of acceptable backup documentation, providing the ahead grants were used for that purpose. A sponsor should carefully consider which type of expenses would be better to fund with ahead due to this backup documentation requirement versus perhaps another funding source. Sponsors should also consider ahead funding for as few line items as possible, since backup documentation will be required for every line item, and this makes it easier for the sponsor to track expenses. Here are a few examples of acceptable backup documentation for common ahead expenses. For salaries, wages, or benefits, a sponsor can use W-2s, pay stubs, or a detailed payroll report. For consultants or other professional services, we typically require paid invoices or copies of checks. For indirect and overhead expenses, we typically see a federal allocation report or a written explanation from the sponsor. For other expenses, please ask the bank about other uses not listed on the budget or discussed in the webinar. I'd like to emphasize the importance of backup documentation for compliance purposes. It is a requirement of receiving an ahead grant, and as a reminder, non-compliance may impact receiving an award this year or in future years.
You are welcome to contact Lena Robinson, Osama Gassama, or the Community Investment Team following contact information if you have any further questions. Thank you for your participation today.